What is going on, everybody? Nick Farabaugh back here for another episode of the Steelers Breakdown Podcast. This is day 3 of the podcast, second here solo. This time next week, literally today, 1 week from today, training camp will be ongoing. And the Steelers report in less than a week. They report on Wednesday. We will be out there every single day, providing you guys coverage here for Steelers training camp. But today I want to talk about something we touched a little bit on in the first episode, but I want to delve a little deeper into it. I want to talk about Arthur Smith and the Steelers offense. This is one of the biggest questions that I get every time that someone really brings up the new on the Steelers offense. Obviously, the first question I get is quarterback, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. The second question I get is usually, will they acquire a wide receiver or is someone else sticking out in that wide receiver room? But what else I get is this Arthur Smith offense. And it's different from what the Steelers have had in the past. So I want to talk a little bit about philosophically where he comes from and kind of how you mesh this all together to really give an intriguing picture. One that's certainly better than what they had last year in Matt Canada. So here's kind of where the Arthur Smith offense comes from. First of all, it's a McVay adjacent offense. We've been talking a lot about who they would hire in January and who that could be. And the biggest thing that always kind of struck my eye and really kind of became apparent was they were searching in the McVay tree. You looked at guys that they interviewed like Zach Robinson or Gerard Johnson. These younger up and comers, they come from Shanahan, McVay adjacent trees. So you see that where they wanted to go. I think that's what they wanted to do with Matt Canada. Matt Canada, before he was hired by the Steelers, while he had kind of flamed out at a few places in the college football mainly. When you talk about the NFL, I mean his influence was felt. The way he used motion, the way he switched strength to weak, the trade motions that he used, jet motion, jet sweeps, different ways in which he incorporated those into the run game, and then others took it further into the pass game. Guys like Andy Reid and even guys like Sean McVay. I mean, they took a little bit of what Matt Canada did. He was a real kind of innovator in motion offenses, quarterback run game. He was really one of the first guys to use this and use these principles that we now see, all throughout the NFL from the Shanahan McVay tree. So I think that that's what they were trying to get at with the Matt Canada offense. Obviously, it didn't work out, I think, for a plethora of reasons. But Arthur Smith's another play at that. But he's a guy that legitimately has ties to the McVay system. And the tie is he worked under Matt LaFleur in Tennessee. His 1 year in Tennessee, Arthur Smith was the tight ends coach. Arthur Smith's offense is a little interesting, though. While he is a McVay kind of disciple by proxy due to LaFleur, who is a true McVay Shanahan disciple, you look at someone like Mike Mularkey, who he also coached under. And you see a lot of similarities in the Mularkey offense and the McVay offense. It's like the meshing of what you would expect in those two offenses. So it's a really unique offense. I don't think there's really quite an offense like what Arthur Smith runs. I think there's good and bad to the offense. I think the good is, first of all, the McVay Shanahan principles are all there, especially the 2019 principles. Lots of wide and mid zone. You're going to get, those angles, really force linebackers to climb over the trash, force secondary players to tackle, let your running backs win one on one in the alley, and really ask your offensive linemen to be athletic. So it's a little different than last year when we were talking about what you saw with, say, a guy like Matt Canada, which he did run a lot of his own, but it was more inside zone and split zone. Now you will see that with Arthur Smith, he'll run split zone, inside zone, different things like that. He'll run duo, but it's not as much as wide zone. Wide zone is the bread and butter of the system. Meanwhile, it was just kind of a complementary piece of the Matt Canada offense. It's not that they didn't run it last year; it's that they just didn't run it in this frequency. Arthur Smith ran as much wide zone as anyone in the NFL, and as little gap concepts as anyone. That's another big thing that I think is different from this year. We saw last year once Matt Canada got fired, the Steelers really leaned into power, trap, crunch, counter, different things that require pulling guards, pulling tackles. They really let their athletic linemen get out into space, and theoretically they should do it again this year because Troy Fautano will add to that. You still have Broderick Jones, who's a phenomenal puller. You two really good pulling guards in Daniels and Sayamalo. And while I think Zach Frazier isn't an elite athlete, at the center position. I think he's a good athlete. So you can really allow him to work in space. He'll work in space, in that wide zone system too. I don't think he's a lumbering player by any means. I think some of his athleticism concerns. By athleticism, I more so mean, the quickness and the speed to get out in space. Not, the wrestling background is obviously great, and he has this great ability to play with leverage. But I think those were a little oversold during the pre-draft process from some people. So really, when you look at what Arthur Smith is going to look to do, you're going to see a lot of zone. You're going to see probably less gap stuff, but we'll see. Is that going to be something new? They kept Pat Meyer and Eddie Faulkner aboard. I wonder if that was to keep some run game continuity. So far, Zach Frazier said in the spring they have not installed any, but I'll be looking out for it at training camp. I think it's going to be really interesting and probably very important for them to really succeed here because I think Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are both phenomenal gap style runners. So that's something you'll see. Another principle you'll see though, is just let's just go down the basics of McVey Shanahan stuff, the condensed formations, the motions before the snap to switch, weak to strong. You're going to see multiple tight ends. You're going to see working inside out in the pass game. Play action is going to be huge, whether that's bootlegs or deep balls. You're going to see all of that. So Arthur Smith's offense works inside out and really tries to target that middle of the field. So you're going to see all of that. You're going to see, 2, 3 tight ends. You're going to see probably 2 running backs. You're going to see less true 11 personnel. But you're also going to see different formations that are going to be aided, I think, to someone like Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. And by that, I mean, not everything's going to be under center. You're just running wide zone, bootleg, hit him in the flat or hit him on the dig, hit him on the comeback, whatever it might be. I don't think everything's going to be like that. What I think it will end up being is you're going to see some pistol. You're going to see some shotgun play action. I think there's going to be a lot of pistol play action. I think it gives them some different versatility. It allows them to play really condensed. It allows, the wide receivers are going to be asked to block a lot in this offense. When you are in condensed formations, you're going to really bring as many people into the box. And there's pros and cons of that. You can bring people into the box, for the run game, so your wide receivers better be able to dig out safeties. But on the other hand, you also are able to create traffic, and so you can create different conflicts in the secondary and at the second level to get guys open on these conflict routes, and that's going to be a big thing. Hitting. I think Roman Wilson, for example, you watch his tape at Michigan, a guy that would play in the slot and then maybe motion in off the hip of the tight end and then would dart across the field and over route. Like I think we'll see that plenty this year. It makes a lot of sense to me. To use him in that role, for example. So there's a lot of reasons why he values wide receiver blocking and playing inside out and really opening up that middle of the field is a big part of it. But if you're going to let Russell Wilson do what he does best, you're going to have to play him in the shotgun where he's able to read a defense, mitigate the height factor, which I think is more of a factor now that Russell Wilson isn't the elite athlete he was. I think he looked better last year from an athletics perspective. Talked about how he kind of got his body right and, really got back to what he was doing when he was younger, and he felt better than he ever had. And you saw the burst a little bit, but, the out of structure magic isn't fully there anymore, but the arm is. So if you can put guys in conflict, you can do high-low concepts. We saw him do this all the time with A.J. Brown and Corey Davis when he was in Tennessee. So that's a big part of it. The basis of the Arthur Smith offense with the personnel the Steelers are going to have, even whether it's Justin Fields or Russell Wilson at any point this season, the basis of the offense is going to be quite simple. I think, he sees a lot of too high coverage. And the reason why he sees a lot of too high coverage is because Arthur Smith naturally wants to air the ball out, but he gets single high coverage too. He gets a lot of different looks, but that's because he can dictate looks. When you're playing inside out and your kind of main goal with the run game is to dictate the coverage, that's where you really can blossom this scheme. And so that's the basis of what Arthur Smith wants to do. And so what he wants to do is, and here's the basics of it. Say they're in one high. Well, if you're in one high, you have an extra player that comes down. Usually that strong safety comes down to the box. So you'll have, a 7-8 man box, which is obviously less advantageous to running the ball. Well, then you can hit him with play action and go behind him over the top with the deep ball. But if they're in too high, it's going to take away the explosive plays, the deep ball, because you're going to have another guy roaming back there. But you don't have that extra man in the box, so it's later. So you can run the football. That's the basics of this Arthur Smith offense, when we're talking about it. So when you talk about switching from one high to two high, it's deeper than that. Football is deeper than that, but on a basic level, that's how this thing works. That's how this thing's going to work. So the run game should work in opening up Russell Wilson's strengths. And you look at when Russell Wilson was at his best, with a guy like Marshawn Lynch who could really run the football, they were able to dictate coverages, and Russell Wilson's moon ball, his deep ball, was really able to open up. So that's going to be a big part of this plan. I think another part of the plan, whether Russ or Justin Fields is in there, is going to be the quarterback run game. We've seen Arthur Smith in years past have a really robust quarterback run game with guys like Marcus Mariota. He even did a little bit with Tannehill. Ritter did it a little bit last year, but you're going to see read option. You're going to see different looks there. That's where I think guys like Falatano and Jones in space, Darnell Washington, Jalen Warren, even leading these guys in space could be really deadly. He's proven to be able to scheme up a really good quarterback run game. So I think you can expect that to be a part of this offense as well. I think at times the pass game schematics leave a little bit to be desired. I think Arthur Smith, there are two things he has to learn from last year and kind of what I would look at. I still think he's kind of running the 2019-2020 version of the Sean McVay offense. And while good, it's kind of, the the brand store version of it, right? Sean McVay's upgraded to these gap schemes and to these new looks out of empty, and we've seen Arthur Smith start to incorporate more empty, where the backfield is empty and you could spread them out, and I think that's part of the beauty of his offense too. Is you can play two tight ends, two running backs, and then spread them out. That's the beauty of having a guy like Cordero Patterson too, who has that running back wide receiver background. So I think you look at stuff like that, and we'll see empty because I think Russell Wilson's also very good out of empty, very good at just dissecting a defense and getting the ball out quick. So I expect to see some empty stuff. So that's one adjustment. Want to see more empty, want to see more pistol, want to see that play action stuff out of shotgun and pistol. I think that's going to be a big part of it with the Russell Wilson marriage. I think you want to see more of that gap stuff. I want to see more gap scheme. I want to see, the stuff that we talked about, the counters, the traps, the crunches, get these guys on the move, get the offensive line on the move, just because they're so athletic. They have a very special line in terms of athleticism and working in space. So I think they should really utilize that. So I'd like to see that. And the third thing is I just want to see a little bit more razzle dazzle in the passing schematics. And that doesn't mean, trickery. That just means, a little bit more seasoning on it. I think sometimes it gets a little vanilla, and what happens sometimes is teams key in on concepts from different looks, and the spacing can also be sometimes pretty bad on some of these route combinations. So you'll see some guys in the same area, but he's Arthur Smith is a guy that likes to use all of his talent all around the field and in different formations. So guys like Pat Frymuth, for example, should play all over this kind of formation. He in empty, he can be out wide, he can be in the slide, he could be attached to the, he could be, I mean, he could be anything. He could be even like a flanker type. He could be this kind of fullback-ish type if you split them off. I mean, they do all this stuff. They've done this stuff with guys like Kyle Pitts before, and Bijan Robinson and Drake London. When he has a superstar that he really believes in, those guys will get the treatment that they want. And so that's something to look at. Guys like George Pickens, Pat Frymuth, both the running backs, I expect to be guys that they move around to try to utilize in different ways. But that's the basics of the Arthur Smith offense. It's going to be a different look this year. I think it'll be better. I think the schematics are going to work. I'd like to see a few tweaks from Arthur Smith, but I think it can work. I think there's a real path here to where the Russell Wilson Arthur Smith marriage works, and if that's how it ends up working out, I think they can be a decent offense. I don't think this is going to be an elite offense this year, especially with the wide receiver room. I still have questions about that. We talked about that yesterday, about the questions that I have in that wide receiver room. But I think this can be a solid offense, certainly better than they have been last year, where they were 3 and out all the time. So I think this can be a better offense, and certainly on a schematic level as well. Folks, thanks for listening to the Steelers Breakdown podcast. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn the notification bell. There's more coming every day. Next week, we're going to be at training camp. It'll be very, very fun doing it from the field instead of right here in the basement. And make sure, if you are listening, make sure to leave a review and really tune into that every day. It's coming out. We're going to hope to get on more of a schedule here, get it out more like 5 o'clock, but some stuff with the launch has delayed a little bit of that, but we're going to try and get on a schedule and get these ready for your drive home, drive to work, whatever it might be. All right, folks, thanks for listening. be back tomorrow.